You can say all the right things, but still, no one at the top seems to notice. And that's because senior executives aren't processing information, they're filtering for relevance and authority through the signals you convey, either through your spoken words or otherwise. And when you understand these filters, that's when every conversation can become an opportunity for you to influence upwards. In this video, I'm going to share with you the 5 rules on how to speak so that the message you convey has senior executives listening to what you have to say. Most professionals speak to inform, but executives listen to decide. While you are sharing information, they are scanning for risk, for decision, for vision, for value, for direction. They're scanning for a lot of things. And that's why if you want to succeed in that room, it's important that you leverage these 5 rules of speaking like an executive. Rule number 1, be more nuanced with the context, not the content. So let's get this clear. I'm going to talk about content first. What is content? The content is the principal substance of your message. It's what fills the air when you speak, right? For example, it's your explanation, it's the data, it's the graphs, it's your logic, it's your project updates, all of the things that you say to demonstrate that you know. That's what fills the air. That's content. Now, given that, there are different levels of content. You have content that just purely informs, right? Here's the project status. Here's what I found in the graph, and here's what that graph means. Right? It's just, that's one level of content. And you have that on the left extreme, and then it's on a spectrum, the different types of content, and all the way, that's purely inform. And then you have all the way up into content that is absolutely transformational, that creates an effective outcome. It creates change. It ignites inspiration towards something different, a different future. Content can do that too. So you have a spectrum of the different values of content, right? And how substantial that content is, from just informing to inspiring transformation. So that's content. So now what's context? Context is the sense of meaning that's wrapped around those words. It's not the words themselves, but it's the world that your words live in. And context is extremely important because when you convey context and when you're more nuanced with your context, you are informing, you're telling the listeners why it matters. You're telling them where to place it. You're telling them the contextual, the meaning around it. And that's really important when you're delivering a communication piece. Context creates the language of relevance because they listen through context. And that's why I teach something called the golden triangle. And a triangle has 3 sides. So this is a golden triangle of communication success. On one side of the triangle is your content, which is your message, what I shared earlier. On the other side, on the next side of the triangle is the context. Do you understand the context? Are you working to convey the context? Are you shaping the context? Are you conveying it effectively? And the third side of the triangle is your audience. How well do you understand your audience? What are their values? What are their priorities? How are they spending their focus? What is their mindset? What's their attitude? What are the things that are solutions for them? How do they think? So how well do you understand your audience? And when you have these 3 sides of the golden triangle, right, you have the content, you have the context, and you have your audience. What you do is you use the knowledge that you have, the deep knowledge you have about your audience, and the deep knowledge that you are creating and contextualizing in the context, and that you create the content to match both of those. So that is the golden triangle, understanding 3 of these things, and then we'll move on to the next concept. You see, most people obsess over getting their content right? They want to make the best slides. They want to put words on the slides. They obsess over the design of that slides. They obsess over their talking points and rehearsing their talking points so it sounds perfect. They obsess over the content, the details of their content. But here's the thing. Executives don't live in the information world. They live in the world of decisions. And in that world, context is the currency. You see, when you're getting up there and you're speaking in front of executives and you give them raw information, they then have to process that information and make meaning out of it. They can do that, but they want to know that you can do it too. But if you already know how to think at that higher altitude of thought, and you've gone through to process that information, and you deliver it in the decision economy, and you have delivered it in context, now what you're presenting is ready-to-use insights. And they want to know that you can do that. They recognize individuals who know how to do that, not individuals who obsess over their slides and their talking points. You see, context is the currency because executives and people in general, they hear things through context. And now this takes us to rule number 2, which is to speak with genuine mastery. You see, when it comes to achieving a meaningfully successful career that's fulfilling, it comes down to 3 essential elements, the 3 determinants. And they are quite simply, you have your vision and goals, mastery, and then you have an action plan. All 3 of these is really important because let's say you have mastery and you have the action plan, but you do not have vision and goals, you won't know where you're going and it's confusion. And now let's say you have your vision and goals, you have mastery, but you do not have an action plan, then it's really a false start. It might seem like you're making progress at first, but it's unsustainable when winter comes, when disruption follows, it's a false start. Now, here's the point I want you to realize. Now, let's say you have vision and goals and you have an action plan, but you do not have mastery. That is a recipe for anxiety. You can have the best action plan. You can have absolute clarity in where you're heading and what your goals are that are meaningful to you. But if you haven't mastered the skills and you haven't mastered yourself, if you haven't mastered your environment, if there were things you have not mastered, then you will have anxiety as you try to follow through with your action plan. And anxiety is really the source of procrastination. It's really the source of not being able to follow through. It's really the source of a lot of second guessing and self-doubt. And that's why mastery is important to be able to achieve these 3 things. So if you're listening to this and you desire to achieve that level of mastery for your career and for your vision and goals, and even if you haven't had clarity on your vision and goals, if you develop mastery of yourself and you have mastery of your internals, then it's much easier to understand yourself and create those vision and goals. And if you desire to have that level of clarity and that mastery for the end of this year so that you can start the new year strong, I invite you to work with me next month. Below this video, there is a link that leads to my year-end mastery collection. And it really is a rare collection of my best trainings and my best coaching. It's like a private coaching vault that I'm opening to you. First time ever I'm doing this. And also in December, you have a chance to work with me live, to converse with me. And that's where I'm going to help you to strategize what you need to master. What does the plan look like for the new year? So click the link below and I look forward to working with you on the inside. And this takes us to rule number 3, which is to speak in the dominant value language. So what does this mean? A dominant value language. When you are in a room of senior executives, every individual is different. Now, they may have common goals and common understandings, but every individual, have you ever noticed their opinions and their individual approaches are different? And that's because no 2 people are the same when it comes to what they value. Every individual has a system and a structure of values where something is the highest value to them, and then everything else is in descending order of value, like how profound it is. And this is really important because when you're in that room, it is wise to understand within those executives that you're presenting in front of, what's the dominant value that is among them. And whenever you find that out, there is a language associated with that. Think about it. In your life, what do you value most? Is it family? Is it providing for your kids? Let's say it's family and providing for your kids. If that is the highest value in your life, then do you notice that you have a value language associated with it? How you talk to somebody, how you talk to yourself, how you talk to your family. There's a value language associated with it. And this is exactly what helps to create the context. In that room when you're speaking to executives, do you know what the dominant value is? And can you speak the dominant value language? As soon as you can speak the dominant value language, their attention goes up. and their retention, their how well they remember what you said goes up. And let me prove it to you. Let's say your highest value in your life is family and providing for family. If somebody were to speak to you about what it means to care for family, how to protect your children, and how to rear them to become disciplined individuals, if they were to talk to you about that using the dominant value language, your ears will perk up. You'll pay attention, and you will more likely remember what they said. Same thing. The essence of the concept of human behavior is the same thing with executives. So that's why rule number 3 is to speak in the dominant value language. Now, rule number 4, it's to speak with fiscal responsibility. Fiscal responsibility is having a mindset of economic stewardship. And you might be wondering, well, what's the connection of economic stewardship to speaking? And there is a very strong connection. You see, when you speak, you have access to a wide vocabulary. It might mean that right now you might know 50,000 words or 100,000 words. Some of you might even know 200,000 words. And as a result of that, when you speak, you are stringing the words together in linguistic architecture. When you string them together and it makes sense and you convey meaning through that linguistic architecture. And this is it's important to be responsible in that linguistic architecture. So this is something I call being fiscally responsible in speech. Because if you think about it, all the vocabulary words that you know, when you say it, you're spending them. It's like you spend those words. So when you are demonstrating fiscal responsibility in speech, you are spending the words with stewardship so that the words create profitability. You're not just spending them recklessly, but you are spending them with stewardship so that it's a profitable return on the word spent. You don't spend words to sound smart, you allocate language to create movement. You don't inflate the narrative, you compound the value. You don't speak to fill silence, you speak to fill purpose. You don't hide in the abstract, you stand out in the truth. You don't spill out the whole backstory, you open with the headline. You don't lead with your efforts, you speak in outcomes. Taking responsibility in your linguistic architecture is part 1 on how you speak with fiscal responsibility. Part 2 is how you take responsibility in your thought processes. I always tell individuals, a lot of people come to me and they say, well, Dr. Grace, I need help in my communications. I always have trouble finding the right word to say. I think about it after the fact and I regret not saying this, or I tried to express myself and it wasn't really clear. And I've heard it all when it comes to challenges in communication. And from time and time again, they look for the tactical advice in communication. And they do things like, well, I need to study vocabulary words. I need to practice till it hurts, memorize a script. They do all these tactical things. And when I work with them, what I uncover most of the time is that it's not a communication problem, it's a thinking problem. And this is where a thinking problem is being responsible in your thought processes. Because the quality of your thoughts determines the quality of your communication. How thoughtful are you? How are you organized in your thinking? How are you masterful in your critical thinking? How are you thinking through your perspectives? How are you thinking through your insights? How are you thinking through what you really believe? How are you thinking through how you express yourself? All of these require a higher altitude of thought, and schools don't teach this. So that's why when people come to work with me, I don't talk about body language or making eye contact. I don't tell them to write a script and memorize it. I work on their thought processes. I show them how to think. When in your college education did someone teach you how to think? So that is really important. Fiscal responsibility in speech means taking responsibility over your thought processes. Now watch this. Number 1, we've taken responsibility over our linguistic architecture. That's how you speak. Number 2, you've taken responsibility of your thought processes, how you think. So you're taking how you speak, how you think, and that leads to how you act. Taking responsibility over your personal operations. And the personal operations part is huge. Because if you're listening to this and you desire to advance your career, to get to the next level of your career or the next stage of leadership, a lot of it has to do with your personal operations. How you act on a day-to-day basis, how you act when nobody's looking, how you act when you're under pressure, how you act when key individuals are looking and filtering through your relevance and your authority, and how you act when all crises breaks out, how you act in certain situations. So your personal operations is really important, and it really stems from how you've been speaking and how you've been thinking, and it formulates how you've been acting. So this is why when I teach, when I coach, when I mentor, it's these three things: how you think, how you speak, and how you act. Which takes us to rule number 5, which is to focus on direction and decision, not the details. Let's talk about direction first. Direction, I'm referring to the direction, the vector of intent. Intention is your intent. And make no mistake about it, intent is a vector quantity. Now, that's a physics term. When something is a vector quantity, it means you can draw an arrow, and an arrow points in a certain direction. So let's say you have an intention, you can draw an arrow and it points a certain direction. And then something happens, and then you change your intention. Now it points in a different direction. So you take the tail of the second arrow, you connect it to the head of the first arrow, and now you have something that points in a completely different direction because you draw the resultant vector, which is connecting the tail of the first vector to the head of the second one. And as you can see, that the intention is now completely in a different direction than the intention in the beginning. So this is all vector quantities add up this way. Intention is a vector quantity, it has direction. Decision is a vector quantity, it also has a vector. So that's why it's important, number 1, that you focus on direction. Now let's talk about decision. A decision is a commitment. And when you make a commitment, you cut off all other possibilities. Now, it's inherent in the word itself, decision. And it's important to look at words because there's a lot of wisdom behind words. The word decision comes from the Latin word decidere, which means to cut off. Now, the Japanese word decide, decision, is katsudan, which the second character of it is tatsu, which means to sever and to cut off. This rule is to focus on decision and to focus on direction and not on details. A lot of professionals obsess over the details, the content of their details. They obsess over their talking points. But here's the thing, the more you share details, the more you're going to lose them because they're caught up. You've caught up in the details and they can't keep up with that. They're trying to filter and process all your details to understand the meaning behind it, and you've lost them. And so if you are overly sharing the details, basically what you're doing is you've withdrawn from the bank account of their attention. And if you're majoring in details, you're not going to be majoring in executive communication, the language of decision, because executives don't operate in the language of details, they operate in the language of decision. On the other hand, a decisive message with direction is a deposit of confidence. So don't drown your executive audience in a lot of details. Instead, drive them towards an inspired direction with a decisive action behind it. And when you do this, that's when you fully embody this rule. Rule number 5 is focusing on direction and decision. And you need to become a decisive individual yourself as well. In order for you to speak this way, you have to become a decisive individual yourself and an individual who's clear in your direction, who has that clarity, and who is able to let go of the details. And when you speak this way, you're no longer a reporter of activities, but instead you are a creator of movements. And that's exactly what executives listen to, and that's what they remember.